They thought I didn't hear them. They thought I was too busy blowing out candles, too old, too distracted by the number 70 flickering on top of a homemade cake. What they didn't know was that the sentence they whispered that night would follow us all the way into an Ohio courtroom, and that's where they'd find out exactly whose house this really was. Before I tell you what happened, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. A front porch in Texas, an apartment in New York, a quiet kitchen in Portugal. I read them. It helps, knowing there are other people awake in the world while I tell this. I was standing over my own kitchen table in Ohio, in the same little house I'd lived in for more than 40 years. The lamp over the stove hummed. The cake smelled like cinnamon and butter. My niece Emily had taped up a happy 70th banner that wouldn't stay straight. One corner kept drooping like it was tired, too. On the mantel were the usual suspects. My husband Harold in his Navy uniform, his crooked grin caught in black and white. My son Daniel at 10, standing proudly beside a rusty blue bicycle. A picture of the front yard, the year Harold planted 3 rose bushes and said, "We'll keep this house, Rosie. No matter what, we'll keep it." I drew in a breath to blow out the candles. I was about to make a wish I'd made every year since Harold died, that the house would always be a home, not just a building, when I heard it. A whisper just behind me. "After tonight, we'll finally have the house to ourselves." It was Daniel's voice, low, like he didn't mean for anyone over 70 to catch it. And then Laura's soft laugh, my daughter-in-law, polished and pleased. The closest candle trembled. My lungs forgot what to do. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misheard, that maybe he meant the house to ourselves, as in company leaving, quiet night ahead, light talk like that. But the tone, that tone was not about dishes and leftovers. It was the tone of someone picturing new furniture where your memories are. I straightened up slowly, pretending to fuss with the candles so I'd have an excuse to listen. Laura's hand slid along Daniel's arm. She leaned in, the way women do when they're already decorating a room in their heads. "We'll call the realtor next week," she murmured. "The market's hot. If we list it in the spring, we'll get top dollar. We'll find something safe for her and finally start our own chapter." "Just don't bring it up tonight," Daniel replied. "Let her enjoy her birthday. After tonight, we'll finally have the house to ourselves." Then he stepped back, put on his good son smile, and said louder, "Come on, Mom, make a wish." I did not cry. At 70, you learn there are tears that help and tears that just make other people feel better about what they're doing to you. Instead, I closed my eyes, pretended to wish, and in that single breath, I saw my whole life in that house. Harold and I signing the mortgage at a tiny bank in our little Ohio town, his calloused hand shaking as he said, "This is it, Rosie. No more moving every year." The first winter when the heat barely kept up and we slept in socks. Daniel dragging in mud on his sneakers, Harold scolding him and then winking at me when he thought I couldn't see. Me patching the roof by myself after Harold died on a ladder that creaked like it had opinions. I blew out the candles. 70 tiny ghosts of smoke rose up and twisted into the kitchen light. Everyone clapped. Someone made a joke about needing a fire extinguisher for that many candles. Laura put her arms around my shoulders in a hug that felt more like a polite scarf than an embrace. "Make a good wish," she murmured in my ear. "Oh, I did," I said. She had no idea. If you've ever lived half your life inside the same walls, you'll understand what I'm about to say. A house stops being property after a while. It becomes a living ledger. Every scuff, every dent, every chipped plate tells on you. The second stair in my house sighs when you step on it because Harold's toolbox cracked it one November and we never fixed it quite right. The kitchen table has a ring from the night Daniel spilled grape juice and I laughed instead of yelling. There's a little nail beside the back door where Harold used to hang his cap after every shift. You don't just sell that. You don't box it up and call it downsizing. After Harold's heart gave out when Daniel was 12, that house turned into my anchor. I worked nights at the diner out on Route 14, refilled coffee cups for truckers who called me ma'am and left nickels under the saucers. During the day, I worked at the small factory sewing upholstery for car seats, my fingers raw and my back on fire. I came home to that house too tired to cook some nights, so we ate cereal by the TV. I cut Daniel's hair myself at the kitchen sink. I sewed his prom suit on that table. I stretched every dollar until it squealed, all so the bank wouldn't take the only place my husband and I had ever owned. People like to ask, how did you manage, as if there's some noble answer. You manage because you have to. You manage because nobody is coming to rescue you. You manage because a 12-year-old boy is sleeping in the bedroom at the top of the stairs and you promised his father you'd keep a roof over his head. Years later, Daniel grew up. He moved out, moved back, moved out again. He got a job in logistics in Cleveland. He met Laura at some corporate training. She walked into my life with a designer bag and a spreadsheet brain. Everything about her was neat. Hair, handwriting, opinions. At first, I was grateful. She organized Daniel's chaos. She brought casseroles when I had my gallbladder surgery. She set up online banking so I didn't have to wait in line at the branch. She saved coupons. She brought me vitamin pills in pretty little boxes. Then, gradually, the help shifted shape. "Let me take over the bills, Roseanne," she said one day, as if she were offering me a slice of pie. "It'll be easier, less stress for you." She started with the electric bill, then the water. She'd pop by the house, gather the mail, tuck certain envelopes in her bag. Whenever I asked, she'd say, "All handled, you don't have to worry." But worry is exactly what you do when your name is on the mortgage and the bills stop landing on your table. Then came the comments. "You know, these stairs make me nervous," she'd say, standing at the bottom and looking up as if gravity had just been invented. "If you ever fell, you'd be so much more comfortable in an apartment," she'd add, stirring her coffee, "somewhere with an elevator, somewhere closer to us." Daniel would back her up, but softer. "We just want what's best for you, Mom. You shouldn't be alone in a house this size." Then came the realtor brochures that somehow appeared next to my salt shaker. "Just to look at," Laura would smile, "no pressure." Then the phrase I started hearing more and more: "When we sell the house." Not if, when. I swallowed a lot of words that year. You learn, especially as a woman, that pushing back makes you difficult, while swallowing it makes you grateful. But every time Laura used that word when, something in me tightened like a knot in a dishcloth. I started to notice other little things. At church potlucks, Laura would introduce me as Daniel's mom, but talk over my stories. She'd correct me like I was a child when I told a date wrong. When I tried to talk about Harold, she'd change the subject to interest rates or renovations. One Sunday, we were all sitting at their place. Laura had her laptop open at the kitchen island, scrolling through listings. "This one would be perfect once we sell your place," she said, turning the screen toward Daniel. 3 bedrooms, big yard for the kids when we have them, updated kitchen, the equity from your mom's house plus ours. We could really make a move. I was standing at the sink, drying a plate. I don't think she realized I could hear her. Or maybe she thought, at 70, your ears only work when people want them to. Daniel hesitated for half a second. "We should talk to Mom," he said. "Of course," she replied, with that gentle laugh that meant eventually, when it's already decided. I went home that night and sat at my own table for a long time in the dark, listening to the fridge hum, feeling the weight of all the nights I'd worked for that house. The whisper at my birthday wasn't a one-off. It was the lid on a pot that had been simmering for years. They weren't just helping me. They were planning around me. Here's something nobody tells you. When you hit 70, everyone suddenly thinks your life is a group project, and they're the ones getting graded. A few days after the birthday, my niece Emily came over. She teaches second grade over in Parma, always smells faintly of crayons and hand sanitizer, and she is one of the only people who still asks me how I'm doing and actually listens to the answer. We sat on the front porch watching a squirrel argue with a blue jay, and I told her everything. The whisper, the realtor, the bills quietly moving to their kitchen. She didn't rush to defend them. She didn't say, "Oh, I'm sure they meant well." She listened until I had finished. Then she put her hand over mine, her fingers warm and a little paint-stained from some school project. "Aunt Rose," she said quietly, "you know you don't have to just let this happen, right?" "What else am I supposed to do?" I asked. "They're my only family." Her mouth made a firm line. "No," she said, "you're my family too, and you still have a say. As long as your mind is clear, your signature is yours. If they're already talking to realtors without asking you, it's time to talk to someone who's on your side." "Who?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Mr. Whitaker," she said. Everyone in our little Ohio town knows Mr. Whitaker. His office sits right off the courthouse square, next to the bakery that makes the good almond cookies. His windows are always clean. His suits are always slightly wrinkled, like he's been sitting with people in hard moments and hasn't had time to smooth himself out. He handled Harold's will all those years ago. He'd handled half the estates on our street. And more importantly, he'd always talked to me like I was a person, not a problem. Emily made the appointment. "If I make it, you have to go," she warned. "No backing out." 2 Tuesdays later, I sat in his office, the smell of old paper and lemon oil wrapping around me. Family photos lined his bookshelf. There was a faded photo of the high school football team from '79 on the wall. He poured me a glass of water himself, not making his secretary do it, and settled in with a yellow legal pad. "What can I do for you, Roseanne?" he asked. And I told him. Not just about the birthday, about the bills moving off my table, about the whispered "when we sell the house," about the realtor websites, about the way Laura's concern had started to feel like a hand on the back of my neck. He didn't interrupt. He didn't roll his eyes and say, "Kids these days." He just listened, pen resting on the pad like he was making room for my words before his notes. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Do you feel pressured to move?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Do you want to move?" "No," I said. "Not unless I have to. This is my home. Harold and we built our life here." He nodded again. "Then we write that down, while you can still say exactly what you mean." We talked about wills. The one Harold and I had drawn years ago still left everything to each other, then to Daniel. That had made sense when Daniel was 12 and I was 42, and all of us were standing in the same place in life. It didn't make sense anymore, not when my son and his wife were looking at my home like a check they hadn't cashed yet. "Who do you trust to keep the house the way you want it kept?" Mr. Whitaker asked. "Not just as an asset, but as a place." "Emily," I answered immediately. He smiled. That was quick. "She's the one who remembers how Harold hung his cap on that nail," I said. "She's the one who asks about the roses. She's the one who sat with me at the hospital when my hip went out. She doesn't see this place as a number." "Then Emily it is," he said, and wrote her name down. We added other details, a small amount of money I'd been quietly saving to go to a shelter ministry in town that helps widows and older women who can't stay in their homes. A few heirlooms to old friends. Some keepsakes for Daniel, too, his father's watch, the baseball cards they used to argue over, because love and boundaries can live in the same document. Now, Mr. Whitaker said, looking over his glasses, this is your will, your decision. You can change it while you're alive if you want, but once you're gone, this tells the court what to do. Not your son, not your daughter-in-law, not a realtor. You. We read every line out loud. When I was satisfied, he pointed to the line at the bottom. Ready? He asked. I thought of Harold's rough fingers signing the first mortgage. I thought of myself at 30, taking on extra shifts at the diner so we didn't miss a payment. I thought of Daniel at 10, running through the sprinkler in the front yard. Then I picked up the pen and signed. My hand shakes more these days, but that signature was steady. We had witnesses sign. Mr. Whitaker stamped and filed things I didn't pretend to fully understand. When it was done, he slid a copy into a manila folder and handed it to me. Keep this somewhere you can get to it, he said. Not in a safety deposit box no one knows about. Somewhere in the house. Somewhere that says, this is mine. I took the folder home and, after turning it over 3 times at the kitchen table, slid it under the breadboard. It felt right there, the house and the bread and the will, all in one place. Now, a lot of people think that should have been the end. Paper signed, house secured, story over. But life rarely ends just because paperwork's in order. The next piece was the part nobody ever gets ready for, telling Daniel and Laura. I called them and invited them over for Sunday dinner. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, plain Ohio food, the kind you eat at a table where you're going to talk about something serious. They came in like any other Sunday. Daniel kissed my cheek, Laura set a bakery pie on the counter, took one look at my roast and said, "Oh, you shouldn't have gone to all this trouble," in a tone that meant, you went to more trouble than I would have. We ate, we passed bowls, we made small talk about the weather, his work, her latest project. When the plates were pushed back and the coffee poured, I reached for the manila folder. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my ears, but my hands were strangely calm. I need to tell you something important, I said, and set the folder on the table. Daniel's face shifted, just a flicker, from Sunday sun to man who might be about to hear something inconvenient. I went to see Mr. Whitaker, I said. We updated my will. I wanted you to hear it from me. Laura's hand tightened on her mug. "Oh, Roseanne, you didn't need to do that," she said quickly. "We would have handled everything." "That," I said gently, "is exactly why I did it." I told them. Not every line, but the important parts, that Emily would inherit the house when I was gone, that the garden and the little things in it would be her responsibility, that some money would go to the shelter, that Daniel would receive things that were deeply about him and his father, not just the 4 walls. At first, they both just stared at me, like I'd suddenly started speaking French. Then Daniel said, "You left the house to Emily?" Slow, as if maybe he'd misheard. "Yes," I answered. "She understands what it is to me. I trust her to keep it a home, not turn it into a flip." Laura's cheeks flushed a sharp pink. "Roseanne," she said, trying to sound calm, "we've been helping you with the bills for years. We were planning. There it was. "You were planning to sell my home," I said, more evenly than I felt. "You were planning a safer place for me. I heard you, and I am telling you, I am not a couch you get to move." Daniel scrubbed a hand over his face. We thought. "I know what you thought," I said. "You thought I would be grateful to be put somewhere easier while you took on this place. You thought all those nights I stayed up worrying how to make payments counted for less than your spreadsheets." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I just told the truth. The thing about truth is, it doesn't have to shout to hurt. Daniel's eyes filled up, then hardened. We would have taken care of it, he said. Mom, this is a lot of responsibility. The taxes, the repairs. I know exactly how much responsibility it is, I said. I've been carrying it for 44 years. Laura tried one more angle. It's not about the money, she said. It's about fairness. Daniel is your son. And Emily is my family, too, I answered. Fairness is not the same as entitlement. There it was, the word you're not supposed to say to your own child. They left angry, not screaming, but tight, brittle anger that slams a screen door harder than it should and makes tires squeal just a bit on the gravel. The next few weeks were tense. There were phone calls from Daniel that started soft and ended sharp. Text messages from Laura full of phrases like very concerned and unsafe situation and legal options. I answered the ones that deserved an answer and let the others sit. Mr. Whitaker called me in one afternoon and said, they've been in touch. He wasn't surprised. They have questions. They're upset. But the will is valid, Roseanne. You were clear, competent. No one can say you didn't know what you were doing. Then one plain white envelope showed up in my mailbox that changed everything. It was from the probate court in our county with a stamped return address I recognized. Inside was a notice. There had been a challenge filed regarding my estate planning. A hearing was scheduled to review competency and intent. I stood in my driveway, envelope in hand, Ohio wind tugging at the edges of the paper, and felt the world tilt just a little. They hadn't just been hurt. They'd gone to court. Let me tell you something. Nothing will wake you up faster at 70 than realizing your own child is willing to let strangers decide whether your decisions count. I drove straight to Mr. Whitaker's office, envelope on the passenger seat like a small, rude passenger. He read it, sighed, and looked at me over the rim of his glasses. It's not uncommon, he said. Adult children sometimes disagree. The court will want to make sure you weren't coerced. They'll review the will, maybe ask you some questions. But Roseanne, he leaned forward slightly, this is also an opportunity. An opportunity? I asked. For everything to be on record, he said. No more whispers, no more assumptions. In that room, what you decided will be read out loud, in front of them, in front of witnesses. They will have to hear it the way you wrote it, not the way they wanted it. The idea settled into me like a small, surprising warmth. They had planned to sell my home behind closed doors. Fine, we would open the doors. When the day of the hearing came, Ohio looked exactly like it always does in early fall. A little gray, a little gold, a little tired. The courthouse in our town sits on a brick square with a war memorial and a clock tower that's always 5 minutes slow. Emily picked me up in her little car, thermos of coffee in the cup holder, worry in her eyes. You don't have to do this alone, she said. I know, I replied. That's why you're here. Inside, the probate courtroom was smaller than you'd think. No big TV drama, just wood benches, a raised desk, flags, and that special dry smell of paper and air conditioning. Mr. Whitaker met us there with his briefcase, nodding to a few people he knew. My neighbor Clara had come too, her hair up in the same bun she'd worn since 1982. I'm here if you need a witness for what kind of woman you are, she whispered, squeezing my arm. Then Daniel and Laura walked in. They looked polished. Daniel in a pressed shirt he usually saved for holidays, Laura in a blazer that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. They sat a few rows behind us. I could feel the tension radiating off of them. When the judge came in, a gray-haired man with kind eyes and the voice of someone who's seen too many families at their worst, everyone stood. We sat again. The clerk called the case. In the matter of the estate planning of Miss Roseanne Hargrove. That's me. They swore me in. I answered simple questions in a clear voice. My name, my address, my birthday. The judge watched me like he was weighing more than my words. Then Mr. Whitaker handed over the will I'd signed. The clerk clipped it to a larger file, and the judge began to read. Not summarize. Read. In regard to the real property located at, he said my address out loud. Mrs. Hargrove directs that said property, including house, yard, and garden, be devised to her niece, Emily Carson. He read Emily's full name right there in that wooden room, in that Ohio courthouse where my husband once paid a speeding ticket and my son got his marriage license. I heard Daniel suck in a breath behind me. With the request that the house be maintained as a family home and that the rose garden along the north fence be preserved. I'd asked Mr. Whitaker to put that part in. It sounded silly when I suggested it. It didn't sound silly at all when the judge read it. He continued, the small gifts to the shelter, the watch to Daniel, the language about my clear intent to provide a home for Emily, and my deep personal connection to the property. Every sentence was something I had chosen. Every sentence was a door that closed gently on someone else's plans. The judge finished, set the papers down, and looked at me. Miss Hargrove, he said, is this still your wish? Yes, Your Honor, I replied. My voice did not shake. It is. He nodded. You understand that your son and daughter-in-law will not inherit the house under this will? I do, I said. They have their own home. They have their own lives. This is my decision. He turned to the row behind me. Mr. Hargrove, he said to Daniel, you've raised concerns in your filing about your mother's capacity and her intent. Having heard her speak today and having reviewed this document, do you wish to add anything? Daniel shifted in his seat. I turned slightly so I could see his face. He looked smaller than his shirt, like a boy who'd been caught taking something that wasn't his, even if he'd told himself for months he was only borrowing it. He began, then stopped. His eyes flicked from me to the judge, then to the paper. We were worried, he said finally, about her safety, about the stairs. We thought she was being influenced. By whom? The judge asked. Daniel's gaze dropped to Mr. Whitaker, then to Emily, then back to me. For a second, I saw him at 10 again, holding a frog too tightly in the backyard. By my cousin, he mumbled. By Emily. Emily didn't flinch. The judge looked back at me. Miss Hargrove, did anyone pressure you to make this will? He asked. No, sir, I said. If anything, people pressured me to do the opposite. He sat back, studied me for a moment, then said, the court finds that Miss Hargrove appears fully capable of expressing her wishes and understanding their consequences. The will is valid. It is accepted into record. Accepted into record. Those 4 words did something no tense dinner, no whispered phone call could do. They took my quiet decision and made it bigger than anyone's plans. Laura was the one who broke the silence behind me. So that's it? She whispered to Daniel, though we all heard. She just gives it away? The judge's eyes flicked toward her. Ma'am, this is her property, he said gently but firmly. She has the right to dispose of it as she wishes. Dispose. I hated that word, like I was talking about trash and not a life. But in that room, dispose meant something else. It meant control. It meant I had it, not them. The hearing ended the way these things always do, with paperwork and signatures and people shuffling out. No dramatic gavel slam, No shouting, just the quiet sound of a pen on paper, the rustle of jackets, the echo of heels in a hallway. But for me, walking down those courthouse steps into the Ohio light with Emily at my side, it felt like something had clicked back into place inside my chest. Not triumph, not revenge, just rightness. On the way home, we stopped at the bakery. Emily bought 2 almond cookies and insisted on paying. We sat on a bench and ate them in silence. My hands still shook a little from the adrenaline. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes, better than okay." She smiled. Then it was worth it. Back home, a house looked the same. The second stair still sighed. The roses still leaned toward the light. The nail by the back door still waited for a cap that would never hang there again. Later that week, Daniel came by alone. He stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who'd just realized the map he'd been following for years was upside down. "Can I come in?" he asked. "This is your home, too," I said, stepping aside, "as long as you remember that it's mine first." He winced, but came in. We sat at the kitchen table. No folders this time. Just 2 chipped mugs and some coffee. "I'm sorry," he began, staring at his hands. "I didn't think. I thought we were just thinking about what made sense." "What made sense for who?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. "Mom, we talked to a realtor," he admitted. "We were going to list the house in the spring, get you into assisted living. We thought you'd be safer. We thought we could use the money to start a family, pay off debts. I didn't think you'd—" "Fight you?" I offered when he trailed off. He winced. "Yeah," I sighed. "Dan, do you remember the winter your father died?" I asked. "When the pipes burst and we sat in this kitchen in our coats while I called every plumber in town because I couldn't afford the emergency rate." He nodded. His eyes softened around the edges. "I didn't do all that," I said, "so that one day someone else could tell me what made sense for the house. I did it so you had a home. You do. It's not this one anymore. That's okay. That's how life goes. But this one is still mine, and when I'm gone, it will be Emily's. You don't have to like that. You just have to live with it." He swallowed hard. "I was scared," he said finally. "You fell last year. The stairs, the bills. I didn't want to get a call one night that something had happened because I didn't step in. I thought, if we just handled it, I didn't realize how much I was taking." Fear, that old familiar ghost. "I know you were scared," I said, "but fear doesn't give you the right to sell someone else's life out from under them." He nodded, a long, slow nod, like something in him was unwinding. "Can you forgive me?" he asked, voice small. "Forgiveness and trust aren't the same thing," I said. "I can forgive you, but trust, that will rebuild, slowly, over coffee, over Saturdays, over you asking instead of assuming." "I can do that," he said. "We'll see," I replied. As for Laura, you're probably wondering, she came eventually too. Not right away. Pride takes longer to get dressed than guilt. But she showed up one afternoon with a pie and eyes that were less polished than usual. "I said some things I shouldn't have," she admitted on the porch. "I got carried away. I grew up watching my mother get taken advantage of. I promised myself I'd never let that happen to anyone in my family. I went too far the other way. I'm sorry." "I don't need you to manage my life," I said. "I need you to respect it." She nodded. "I'm trying to learn how," she said. We're not best friends now. This isn't one of those stories where everyone hugs it out and the credits roll. Sometimes she still slips and talks about safer options, and I have to raise an eyebrow. Sometimes I still bristle when she reaches for the mail. But there's a line now, a fence, invisible and firm. They've stopped talking about when we sell your house. They've started asking, can we come over on Sunday? Emily still comes on Thursdays to help with the roses. We've planted 2 new bushes, one for Harold, one for all the women I know who quietly lost their homes because someone else thought it made sense. The shelter I named in my will sent a thank you letter with a photo of a long table, steaming bowls, women with tired eyes and tired hands. I put it under a magnet on my fridge, right next to a crayon drawing from Daniel's youngest that says Grandma's house with 4 crooked windows and a big red roof. Sometimes, late at night, I get out the copy of my will, not because I doubt it, but because touching it reminds me of the day I chose to stop being treated like a background piece in my own story. If you've listened this far, maybe something in you is aching. Maybe you're thinking about your own house, your own savings, the way someone in your life says, when we sell, like you're not even in the room. Let me tell you this plain, from one person to another. You are allowed to protect what you built. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to write your wishes down and make them visible, even if other people roll their eyes or call you ungrateful. That doesn't mean you don't love your children. I love my son. It means you also love the younger version of yourself who worked double shifts so those children had a bed. So tell me, where are you watching from? And have you ever had to draw a line like this? Maybe not in court, but at a kitchen table, in a conversation, in a decision that made people angry. If you feel like sharing, leave your story in the comments. It might help someone else who's sitting in a quiet house, listening to whispers about selling the life they fought to build. And if you want to hear more true stories like this about ordinary people, especially older ones, standing up in small, powerful ways, you're welcome to stay with us here on Mature Justice. For now, I'm going to put the kettle on. The second stair will sigh when I go up for my cardigan. The roses along the north fence will catch the Ohio light just right. And my house, my home, will stay exactly where it is, on paper and in truth, no matter who once planned to sell it.